Have you ever wondered how EMDR actually works? Maybe you've heard about it or how it's good for trauma, but wondered how are my eyes moving back and forth going to help me process trauma and get over my issues? I will never forget the first time I heard my therapist talk about EMDR. I thought, what kind of magic voodoo woo woo crap is this, right? So today we're going to start part 1 of 4 series about how EMDR works. And for today's video, we're going to go through the 8-phase model of EMDR. And in subsequent videos, we're going to go through who it might be good for, what it might be good for, how it helps you process. But for today's video, we're just going to go through the 8 phases of EMDR. If you're new here, my name is Kitty, and I am an EMDR and internal family systems therapist in Central Texas, where I own a group practice that focuses on trauma recovery, rooted in my lived experience and clinical expertise of recovering from my own trauma journey, as well as being a certified EMDR therapist. So if you come up with any questions or wonderings or curiosities, put them in the comments below, and I'll get to them as soon as possible. All right, let's dive in. Before we dive into the 8 phases of EMDR, let's talk a little bit about some things to keep in mind when it comes to trauma and how it affects your brain. The other thing I want you to keep in mind about EMDR is what we're doing in all of it is something your brain already knows how to do every night when you go to sleep. It's kind of like facilitating the neurobiology mechanism in your brain that it uses at night when you dream in an intentional and focused way in the office with the therapist. The entire goal of EMDR is never to take your memories from you. It's to tip the scales so that the loudness of the emotional belief comes down to quiet, and we amplify the sound of that positive belief that you already know is true. We're not taking your memories. Nobody is hypnotizing you or anything like that, okay? Know that you have consent to go through the process and that all we're doing is some neuroscience. So to understand how EMDR works, let's first look at what happens in your brain when you experience trauma. Normally, your brain processes experiences and kind of files them away in a zip drive. So it takes in information through your 5 senses and goes, and then it files them away and compacts them down, kind of like a zip drive. In traumatic experiences that have high emotional intensive reactions or high emotional disturbing feelings associated with them, that zip drive gets encoded kind of out of order and all jumbled up. And that means that we can't fully metabolize and process the experience that we've been through. So instead of filing the memory away in a well-organized folder structure, right, it leaves it messy and disorganized. This happens because your amygdala, which is your brain's alarm system, goes into overdrive. So it's like shouting, danger, danger, Will Robinson, stay alert, stay active. That's what hypervigilance is. Meanwhile, your prefrontal cortex, or the logic part of your brain, just kind of keeps going forward in chronological time. And because it keeps moving forward in chronological time, it can't step in and provide the words and the language for that emotion brain. So those parts of our brain get kind of further and further out of sync with each other. That's why the emotional part stays active and gives you that sense that this thing that maybe happened 10 years ago or 20 years ago feels like it happened just yesterday because that memory is emotionally still active in your brain. Okay. EMDR works by facilitating that dreaming. So if you think about REM sleep, when your eyes go back and forth, that's kind of a side effect of your right and left hemisphere talking to each other and having a conversation. So at night, when you go to dream, you go to sleep and you have a dream, your brain is really just saying, okay, what were the bits and pieces of my day that I need to hold on to that might be related to survival of the species, for example, and which parts can I just kind of cast off into long-term storage? What do I need to hold on to? What can I let go of? That's all that's happening when you're dreaming at night. Now, when we are in the office and we are doing EMDR intentionally in that way, we're bringing up that old memory so that your brain can kind of hit like refresh on your brain's filing system or in that zip drive. We're opening up the zip drive and we're moving that memory from its stuck state where it's blaring danger, danger into long-term storage. And when we do that, the emotional intensity of the experience goes down. So you've got this really loud, 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 I'm in danger feeling, felt sense, emotional belief. And this very, very quiet, I'm safe now, right? It's over, I'm safe now. That happened a long time ago, but it's so quiet that the rest of our brain and our system can't hear that. We're going to bring that loudness down to zero and amplify the felt sense of knowing that it's over and I'm safe now, so that that part is louder. And when we do that, all of the ways that we have been managing that feeling of distress and danger in our system fall by the wayside. So let's dive into how EMDR actually works with the 8-phase model of therapy. So one thing to know is that for most EMDR therapists, certainly not all, we are always within the framework of EMDR. Think of it like a box or scaffolding. We're always in the EMDR model, even in sessions that feel like having a conversation or talk therapy, okay? Another point that I will make is that EMDR is efficient and it is quick, but it's a structured form of therapy. Now, a lot of therapists, especially working with complex PTSD like I do, will bring in other tools from the toolbox, which are really just kind of another way of talking about modalities or interventions or ways that therapists work. And EMDR all by itself may or may not be helpful for you in your particular situation. But we're always doing EMDR. It's not just, the tapping or the tappers like you see right here. It's not always just that, okay? That's just one of the phases. EMDR has no timeline. Just like every person is different, so is every brain, every nervous system, and every story. Phase 1 of EMDR is about history taking. It's really about the therapist getting to know you getting to know them, because no matter what, you having a good felt sense of working with your therapist is still really, really important. So phase 1 is about buying some time for your nervous system to get adjusted to this therapist, for them to get to know you and your story and what might be coming up for you. And they're taking in information. They're identifying the memories or issues that are related to causing the current distress that you're coming in to navigate and get through. This step creates really the roadmap for your healing journey. Phase 2 is preparation. And this is where you and your therapist continue with that building rapport and getting to know each other and wrapping your head around the treatment plan and the goals that you have. But they're also going to start teaching you some grounding techniques. They're going to start doing some imagination work, some identifying safe place, moment of Zen, container. There's some activities that we do that's really about teaching your nervous system what this feels like to do this work. What do the tappers feel like? Do I like this? Do I like that? Do I want the light bar or butterfly tapping or the eye movements? There's lots of ways to go about EMDR bilateral stimulation. And so this is about getting to know that. It's teaching your brain and your nervous system what we're doing in this space together. A lot of times, therapists kind of do phases 1 and 2 simultaneously. So they weave them together where maybe at the beginning of the session, they're doing a little bit of history taking, and then they might close out the session with an activity. The next phase is phase 3, which is about assessment. So you're going to focus on a specific memory and you're going to identify 4 key elements. One is the image of the worst part about that experience for you, the negative belief and cognition that goes with that, kind of like our really loud, I'm in danger feeling. It could be, I don't matter, or I'm shameful. There's a lot of different things that it could be depending on the person and their story and their issues. And so this is going to be about identifying that worst image related to that particular memory. Then they're going to want to know the body sensation and the emotion kind of tied to that. And what they're really doing is bringing together logic brain with the words, emotion brain, and animal brain, which has to do with like our body system and things like that. Because we want them all online so that when we get to reprocessing, which is phase 4, then all parts of the brain are kind of working in tandem with each other. In phase 4, this is typically what people think of as traditional EMDR. This is what you've seen videos about and all of that stuff. So this is what people often think is EMDR, even though there's more phases than that. This is kind of the one that people really identify as being EMDR. One thing to know is that you're looking for a memory or an experience that's on a scale of 0 to 10. This is not 20. This is not 15. If it feels like it's higher than a 10, we want to get you a little bit more regulated than that, because in some ways, this is like looking dead on at your what feels like your worst nightmare. So we want you to be able to be regulated and be calm. This should be tolerable. I like to say it kind of has the feeling of an I don't wanna, but I need to, right? If this feels like a hard no, you definitely need to let your therapist know that. EMDR is not necessarily fun per se. It's kind of like taking your medicine. You want to get to the other side. So if it has a sense of kind of, this is going to kind of suck, that is actually what we're going for. But if it's a hard no, that is not, you need to let your therapist know that, okay? Phase 4 is also the phase where we're bringing that really, really loud danger voice all the way down to 0, okay? Now, that doesn't mean that it becomes your favorite memory or something like that. You can still know that what happened was not okay. It's more about your felt sense of disturbance about it. You know, you can look at the memory and be like, yeah, that wasn't okay. And that might feel maybe like a 1, but we're really looking for your level of distress and disturbance. And is that at a 0? That's kind of the goal of this phase. So this is where we're bringing that volume down. Now, phase 5 is where we are amplifying that positive belief. Once that memory feels less overwhelming, we're just going to replace that negative belief with a positive one that you choose. Maybe it's simply, it's over and I'm safe now. That is perfectly fine, particularly when we're dealing with some really big event related trauma, right? Is that it is done. It is in the past. It is no longer affecting you. That doesn't mean, again, that this was okay. It simply means I can now let it go. Your therapist will continue to use those tappers or the eye movements or the butterfly tapping through this phase as well. You may not notice a feeling that is different as far as the tappers go, but it is moving into that phase 5 where we've brought this down to 0 and we're amplifying that positive belief. Phase 6 is a body scan, and your therapist is going to have you just scan your body from head to toe and check in and notice if there's any areas of tension or disturbance, and just kind of go through and see what that part of your body wants you to know. Because what we're looking for is all 3 parts of your brain be nice and calm and regulated. So if the body still has something to say about what happened to you, we're going to let it have its moment, okay? And just be able to let that go. So phase 7 is all about closure. And that means we're going to kind of tie the session off with a bow. We're going to get you nice and regulated so that you can walk out the door and go on with your day, go on with your week. You should not leave session feeling super dysregulated, or you should not be, feeling really dysregulated throughout your week before you see your therapist again. And if you are, you definitely need to let your therapist know. So closure is just kind of about shutting it all down so that it's nice and calm and you can feel good about walking out the door. Now, you might notice, you're feeling a little woozy or a little kind of checked out, that's okay. Your brain is now like, "Ooh, what is happening?" So, a recommendation for the day is to not take any drink any alcohol that day, any substance use. Definitely check with your provider about that or your EMDR therapist about that and their thoughts about it. But typically, we don't want you to do that because your brain is like firing off on all of these memories. You might notice it's kind of like thinking about things throughout the day, revisiting some memories. It's just kind of reorganizing and recategorizing that zip drive, right? So that's okay. That's all normal. You may dream a lot that night. You might not dream at all. You might be really tired, or you might be just kind of spacey for the day. All of that is perfectly normal and expected. If you do engage in substances or alcohol, it won't hurt you. You'll be kind of interfering with the good juju of all of that work that you just did, because your brain will actually keep working for around 6 hours after your EMDR session. So that's kind of cool and exciting as it goes through, putting it all back in together in order that is eliminating that emotional distress. Phase 8 is when you come back to session, you come back for a follow up with your therapist, and they're just checking in to see how the memory feels now, see if it feels resolved, see if you're ready to move on to another issue, or does this kind of bring up some other stuff? That is really common to happen too. Is think of it like peeling back the layers of an onion. We've got that outer layer that looks really obvious and kind of is the loudest thing. And when that calms down, we might be able to have clearer vision into something else that was underneath all of that. Each of these phases and each of these steps in the phase can be different for everybody. It just depends on you, your nervous system, your therapist, how they work. A lot of different factors go into that. That is definitely a question you can ask your therapist. But we're always in the model. And sometimes that means we might be in phase 1 and 2 for a really long time. If I have someone who is having flashbacks and panic attacks all the time, well, I'm going to make sure that they have the ability to be stable and safe in their body, in their mind, all of those things. Otherwise, it's about just continuing to re traumatize you, which is not helpful at all. So, you might stay in various phases at different times. Sometimes people want to come in and work on their trauma when they're in the middle of a school semester or they're about to move or buy a house or get married. And your therapist might be weighing whether now is the best time for you because it kind of has to do with do you have the capacity and the bandwidth to really dive into this work? And is your life in a place to tolerate a little skosh, a little bit of dysregulation and instability, which is possible when we do EMDR? If your job is kind of in a really difficult place or on the line, that may not be the best time for you to do EMDR therapy or do trauma work at all. Kind of depends on all those things. But again, this is an open conversation that you should be having with your therapist. If you have stayed with me this far, thank you so much. Please like, subscribe, share, spread the news around so that we can make free mental health information accessible to everyone. Remember that calm curiosity will reconnect us all and build a more compassionate world that is very divided. Catch you next time.